This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Corenna and Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different Q's.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Corenna Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Joining us in studio is Bobby Charles, Republican candidate for Maine's 2026 gubernatorial race. Welcome to the program.
Hey, it's a lot of fun to be with you guys, so I'm ready to roll.
Thank you for taking the time with us.
Happy to be here.
As you know, Mainers are feeling pretty squeezed at the moment, from high taxes to rising utility bills. What would you do as governor to relieve that pressure and make it more affordable to live and do business in Maine?
You know what? Beside public safety, that's got to be the number one issue I confront in all 16 counties. People cannot afford to live. And, I grew up in this state when things were far more agreeable, affordable. You had what we called the American dream, and you could earn your way to a house, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll give you the what I'll do, but the problem, to articulate it even more fully, is that property taxes are the highest in the country. And that has a direct effect on two of the most important populations of Maine. And those are older Mainers who are being pushed out of their houses. I had a couple the other day email me and say that they had a tripling of their property taxes in the last 8 years. And they said, we did everything right. We paid off our mortgage. We raised our kids in this house. Unless I am in there or someone who will cut these taxes back, ultimately they're going to be pushed out of their house. And ironically, it would mean senior living if they stayed in Maine, and they're shutting down the senior living locations. So this is a true crisis when it comes to older Mainers, and they have a lot of other crises that are in parallel. Example, this governor is raising prescription drug prices. When you squeeze seniors on a fixed income, there's only so much money, and something's going to have to give. And unfortunately, it's going to be their future, and we can't let that happen. Number two, the young people on property taxes, they're so high right now that those under the age of 35 who are working have a median income that is $200 per month short of median rental costs. So how are you ever going to save for a mortgage? And these young people say to me, Bobby, you talk about the American dream, and we want to believe it, but we don't believe it because right now we're living with family and trying to make it. So number one thing is you reduce the mandates that for 30 years have piled up like barnacles on the bottom of a boat. The mandates down on counties and towns. Counties and towns only have one way to raise taxes, which is property. People blame the out-of-staters, and I'm with that a little bit because they moved up here, Boston, New York, and they raised prices post-COVID. But in reality, it's a much more fundamental issue. The state has to get out of the business of spending money and then passing off the cost of those mandates, whether it's drug treatment centers or prison care or dentist, stuff for prisoners. You got to, first of all, stop paying for it, a lot of this stuff, and then stop passing it down to towns. The other piece of it is I am truly afflicted. I run a business in Maine, and I've run a business for 25 years. I talk with many, many business people. And what do I hear over and over again? This business climate is so anti-business that they are all thinking about leaving the state of Maine. I'm not kidding you. I would bet you 2/3 of those that I talk to me about, if this doesn't get better, I'm going to have to leave the state of Maine. So what do you do about that? There's two things you do. First, you go back to all the regs, the equivalent of our state CFR, and you start cutting all these regulations on businesses that are useless. They want to regulate your frog pond. They want to regulate the stream that comes through your backyard. Height the campfire. And that one really bothers me because I grew up in a home that had no electric heat. And until I got off to college and my younger siblings, they got electric baseboard heat after that. I cut 4 cord of wood every fall with my stepfather, and we would put it up 2 years ahead because our whole heat was wood. When you start regulating everything, you create, one of my degrees is economics, and what you end up creating is these indirect costs that are completely unaffordable, just like the cost of inflation that people don't realize it's actually reducing their savings because the dollars that they earned that were worth 100 pennies are now worth 80 and then 70. And so the first thing you have to do is get property taxes down by cutting mandates. The second thing you have to do is get income taxes down. My goal, frankly, and I have CPAs working on it right now, going through the whole state budget, is to essentially reverse engineer the last 6.5 years and perhaps go back even further than that and get down the cost of government to the point where we can eliminate the income tax. Imagine the effect in the state of Maine if we had no personal income tax, and there are already 10 states that do that. Mississippi just did it, and there's no corporate income tax. Not shifting that tax to sales, not shifting it somewhere else, not playing these games that I'm sorry to say the Democrats just play all the time. They say they're doing one thing. Mills says, we've cut taxes here. We're going to give you back money here, but actually they've raised them 5 times over here. We're not going to do that. We're going to literally eliminate the income tax in the state of Maine. If history is any example, what that means is businesses are going to flow like shards of metal to a magnet to Maine, just like they are to these other states. And we're going to be in a position where not only do we not lose our kids to leave the state because that's where they're going to find their jobs, not only do we not lose our businesses because they can't afford to be here anymore, but we're going to pull businesses into the state, generate jobs. I would like to see this be looked at kind of like at the Maine miracle in 4 or 5 years, where people look back and go, that's the model of how you do it. You get property taxes down, you get income taxes down, you ultimately address energy, and at the end of the day, you have a major shift in the culture in the state.
So speaking of expenses, what is your thought on the high or extremely high electric bill that we have?
Yeah, so energy is a fundamental thing that has to change, the cost of energy in the state of Maine. What you have to do on energy, there's multiple layers to what you do to get those costs down. For starters, the market is unforgiving. You know, it's like Winston Churchill used to say about truth. You can step on it, you can kick it aside, but in the end, it's still there. People can only afford what they can afford, and the state has to align policies to increase the ability of people to be able to pay for energy. So how are you going to do that? I've got a number of experts in energy on my team. I am not an energy expert, but I will tell you what they tell me. They say we are headed to 40 cents a kilowatt hour, and that if you think you can't afford your bills now, give yourself 4 more years of a Democrat, and you probably won't still be in your house, or you're going to have to cut heat back to 50 or whatever it is that's going to keep you going. The ultimate answer to this is that you put yourself in a position where optimally you get down to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, because what you do is diversify. So multiple layers to this. The first thing we should be doing is this governor right now, she's a Democrat. She doesn't like fossil fuels, but she should have been going down to the Massachusetts governor and saying, look, the oil pipeline that comes out of Pennsylvania, New York has now folded over because Trump has given them the ultimatum and got them to take the pipeline through New York. You need to have that pipeline come up through Massachusetts and bring that lower cost oil. Instead of hooking it all around the United States and Canada, you need to bring that oil straight to Maine. That will immediately start reducing, because we're a very oil dependent state, incredibly oil dependent when it comes to homes. And so you're going to start reducing the cost of energy by turning on the fossil fuel options that you have. I think another way to reduce the overall energy costs, which has an effect ultimately on electric vehicles too. I mean, people forget you have an electric vehicle. Where does the electricity come from that powers that vehicle? And we have 3 grids in this country, an East Coast, a West Coast, and Texas. Those grids are 75-80% powered by fossil fuels. So on the one hand, if you like electric vehicles, if it's more convenient to you, et cetera, if that's your choice in the market, then you should go ahead and do that. But at the end of the day, you've got to reduce the overall cost of electricity. That's the fundamental right there. Another thing we can do, and I love the suggestions of Reagan Paul and some other Democrats to diversify energy production, we need to bring the thorium reactor idea back to life. We're not talking about restarting Maine Yankee. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about safe, small, highly efficient nuclear reactors. And people get scared when you say nuclear reactor. And I was around when 3 Mile Island happened. That's not at all what this is about. This is like acculturating people to a different kind of energy. Maine's bills could go down to, I don't know, maybe 20% of what they are right now. If you had thorium reactors out there and you had the oil coming up from Pennsylvania, and you also reopened some of the direct oil from Canada, and then you look to natural gas. For what it's worth, I drive a fossil fuel car, and I probably always will. But there are people who choose what they want, and that's what the market's about. You need to give people a choice. But ultimately, it's even more fully about home heating. We're one of the coldest states, and we got to have affordable energy. So I think what we do is we look at the all of the above formula, and we try to make the kind of efficiency possible that brings us down to, optimally something like 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Even if you were at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, you'd be better than where we are right now.
Let's talk about the drug crisis. How serious has it become in Maine? And do citizens fully understand the scope of the issue? What
a great question. So it's really goes to the heart of something that brought me into this race. I have spent my whole life as a crime fighter. I was a litigator, and I was on the Ninth Circuit. I managed all the criminal cases out there. And at that time, even many years ago, drugs were a rising problem. 10 years Navy intelligence and Assistant Secretary of State managing counter-narcotics globally. There is a formula for getting drug traffickers out of the state of Maine. There's a formula for getting drug traffickers out of almost anywhere. And of course, what people don't realize that 85% of all crime goes back to the level of drug trafficking in the state. Why? Because burglaries are tied, assaults are tied, domestic violence is tied. 50% of the domestic violence or more goes back to poly drug use. So, gosh, the work that Bill Phil Diamond has been doing for kids. A lot of that is, again, I hate to say this, but drugs relates to a lot of things. And so I am a diehard when it comes to trying to restore public safety in the state of Maine. The irony was I went away, I come back, and several years ago, I start to look around and realize that all those bad guys I put out of business around the world are right here. We have the Trinitarios, which is a very dangerous Dominican group. I've been up in Holton. I've been in Calais. I've been in all the major cities, all the counties. They are all shellacked right now by fentanyl. We had 10,000 drug overdoses last year in this state, fatal and non-fatal. We lose on average 1 to 2 children a day in the state of Maine to fentanyl or to overdoses, polydrug overdoses. And what are those other drugs? I get a brief every week from DEA. We have the highest purity heroin we have ever had in the state of Maine, found in Lewiston. We have fentanyl. Just last week, we had 2 houses taken down in Fairfield, 1 in Windham. In each of those houses, there was enough fentanyl to kill 200,000 Mainers. And in one, there was enough to kill the entire state. So we've taken our hands off the wheel. What we're talking about is massive fentanyl trafficking by the Dominicans, by the Mexican Sinaloa cartel. They're the feed for a lot of what comes up here, and China. The Chinese grow houses, which are completely unmonitored. We should be able on day one with a stack of executive orders to start taking them down. I have very close relationships to the head of DEA leadership and across this administration. We should be designating every single county in the state of Maine as a HIDTA, a high-intensity drug trafficking area. Ironically, you live long enough and you circle back to where you were in the first place. I wrote a lot of that legislation many, many years ago. It is now time to bring Maine up to speed with the rest of the country. West Virginia, for example, has 17 counties. Every single one of those counties is a high-intensity drug trafficking area, which opens up millions of dollars of law enforcement support for each of those counties. Maine has 16 counties, and this governor has only felt it within her interest to designate one, Cumberland County, as a high-intensity drug trafficking area. Again, executive orders. I will go down to Justice and I will pull up here huge amounts of money from the Office of Justice Programs, OJJDP, SAMHSA. Here's the other piece of the drug problem, and I know I'm putting too much out there, but we have a major, major problem. We have drug traffickers north, south, east, and west. They are killing a lot of our kids. They kill 40 to 70 kids a month, and we have got to turn that around. We also have to get treatment in place that works. Once you've got the drug traffickers out of the state, which I think I can do within 24 months, I have a 30-point plan to make it work. I know how to do this. I put the Medellin cartel and others out of business. Once you've done that, you need a get well, stay well plan for these kids. And a lot of addiction. I meet with these families all the time, both families that have lost their kids and families who have kids addicted to fentanyl. We need to stop that heartbreak in the state of Maine. People need to be able to count on their kids being safe in the state of Maine.
Did you say 40 to 70 kids in Maine?
We lose 40 to 70 kids in Maine per month to drug overdoses. And they think that's a victory. You know why? Because we had slightly fewer this year than last year that we lost, hundreds in each year. I mean, I think we had 700 and some last year, and they've dropped it down to 600 and some. But if you think it's a victory that you've pumped 20,000 units of Narcan into the schools and EMTs, et cetera, a month, and you're losing only 600 kids a year, that is not a victory. That is not treatment. We have only 315 treatment beds in this state, in a state of 1.4 million people. We need to get effective treatment in here for these kids. We need to stop having parents lose their kids, and brothers and sisters lose their siblings, and grandparents lose their grandkids. If there's one thing that has pulled me to this race, it is that. I want to make a great business community, again, in the state of Maine. I want to rebuild education, but I'm going to tell you right now, if we cannot stabilize this state and get the drug traffickers out of here and get these kids back on the right track, the future of Maine is darker than it already is.
If you're just tuning in, you are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Corenna Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a conversation with Maine Republican Gubernatorial candidate Bobby Charles. Now, this will probably be passed by the Maine legislature before this goes live. They are considering a bill that would bar local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE.
I think it's an outrage. The governor who cares about their people should be inviting ICE immediately into the state, and DEA, by the way, and they're ready to be here, okay? We have a 600-mile northern border. We have really a 3,000-mile, if you look at all the fingers, 3,000-mile maritime border. We have not only drugs, but illegals coming up from the south. This governor's invited 75,000 illegal aliens into this state. There are already, they say 5. No, you look closer. There are more than 8,000 illegal aliens in this state. They say, oh, those are asylum seekers. No, first of all, a bunch of them came in illegally And then a number of them have committed crimes. But when you go to see how many of the asylum seekers, it used to be we brought refugees and asylees into this country, particularly after World War II, because they had what you called a well-founded fear of persecution. It had to be proved at the border or in the host country, and that's how you would have a limited number of refugees or asylees. In this moment right now, we have more than 90% of those who claim to be an asylee. All they have to do at the border is speak 3 words in English. I want asylum. Okay, all of a sudden, doesn't matter what your criminal past is, doesn't matter anything else, you're dumped into the state. Of course, the Biden folks literally sent busloads and busloads all over the place. They sent 8,000 of them here. Janet Mills has invited those 8,000 here. She's taken housing away from our veterans that was destined for them and given it 2 years of full luxury housing. And they say, oh, you can't say luxury. Yeah, you can say luxury. It's luxury housing, okay, with EBT cards. And what do they do with the EBT cards? They go and spend them on drugs. So if there was a blueprint for how to destroy the state of Maine, they're following it just line by line. My job is easy. In a world where mediocrity is the norm, being great is easy. When I'm governor, we're going to have a stack a foot high of executive orders. And if we win the House and the Senate, a few votes in each, we are start to codify all of this. We will reverse all this damage.
So obviously, when you've been out there on the campaign trail, what are you hearing about the Paid Family Medical Leave Act?
You know, it's a great question because it relates back to one of your earlier questions. We live in a state where unaffordability has become the norm, and all these other bad things we've been talking about have become normalized, and I dare say even public corruption has been normalized. On the one hand, in principle, the idea of paid family leave is not a terrible thing, but you look at the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire has an opt-in, and they deliver higher quality care for 1/3 the cost. So what's going on there? We have chosen to basically be wholly unaccountable to dump an additional 1% on employers. I'm an employer, right? I've always tried to look after my people. I've always thought quality of life matters. They're going to do the best job possible if I give them the best benefits possible. But there always has to be accountability, both on an employee level and in a governor. You know, her employment isn't open-ended. And I think the problem we've got with paid family leave, what I hear is that people cannot afford another 1% tax and another percent on this and another percent on that. Let's get straight. This governor has a budget that she has bumped up from $6.8 billion to $11.7 billion. What, did I fall asleep and the state doubled in size overnight and now we need double the budget? I mean, 70% increase in the budget? Of course we don't need that. Okay, and we don't need this crazy, almost like a socialist idea that you just keep adding taxes for anything that people, you know, we're spending money we don't have on things that people can't afford to start with. And many cases, like these wind turbines and all these solar things, they don't want them anyway. What we've done is we've basically taken the power away from the people and we've given it to a governor and a legislature and unconstitutional officers. We essentially have a one-party monopoly government in this state, and we've largely had it for 30 of the last 32 years. You look around and say, why is everything going to hell in a rocket ship? Because they've been in charge and they're unaccountable and they've normalized the abnormal. So higher taxes, yeah, what am I hearing? People can't afford to live here. They are leaving the state. I have a call list. This is how this works with a guy running for governor. You look around and I'm told, so I have lots of friends, but then once you know your friends and the businesses that you know, now you have these call lists. So I call people who are longtime givers to the Republican Party and in some cases other parties, but they are people who believe in the future of the state. Very often they pick up the phone and say, I really appreciate the fact that you're there. I hope and pray that you win. I'll give you some money, but I now live in Tennessee. Or I now live in Colorado. These are concrete realities. Or I now live in Florida. I used to just summer there. I live there now. And I take that opportunity to ask them as much as possible why. Many of them were business owners. They felt they could not afford to continue to do business in the state of Maine. That has got to stop. And the other reason is they say, you know, the Maine that I grew up in, the Maine that I loved, many of these are true Mainers, is not the Maine that is there now. And I basically have lost hope that the future can be any different. And I tell them, if they're still in the state of Maine, I say, please hold on until I'm governor because I will reverse all of this. I will. And if you're out of state, we miss you. We'll try to change the laws to get you back up here. And, you know, who knows, maybe the state you're in will end up having higher taxes in Maine after I'm governor and you'll come back.
You come from a family of educators. Obviously, you are well educated. What are your thoughts on Maine's education system?
Great question. And actually, that is the third big area. So after getting the business climate right, getting public safety right, education is the third big thing I'm really worried about. And let me divide my answer into 3 points. First, I do come from a family of educators. My mother taught for 40 years in Monmouth as an elementary school teacher and a remedial reading teacher. She was the model for all of us, quite honestly. And then my aunt taught, my grandmother taught, my brother teaches now at the high school level, my sister teaches, another sister involved in education. It used to be that the state of Maine, believe it or not, we were, in 1992, the number one public education system in the country. And how do we know that? We know that on objective data, which is the only way you should govern, is on objective data. Forget all the ideology and we're going to teach them to be emotionally sensitive instead of mental toughness and all that stuff. Just focus on numbers. 1992, our 4th grade and 8th grade math and reading scores were the number one in the country. Now, you have to ask yourself, why was that? It doesn't obviously have to do with money, because the money in this state for education doubled between 1986 and 2006, and it doubled again between 2006 and now. The more money you put in, the worse results we're getting. The reason originally it was, and I graduated from unaccredited high school, as you indicated, I did. I grew up in a town of 500, little elementary school with 2 classes per room. But the teachers cared. The teachers were supported. The parents were supportive of the teachers. There was a notion that when you go to school, you have to be disciplined to learn, that there's a goal in learning, that understanding math, understanding reading, understanding history. We used to have 1 year of Maine history required. Understanding sciences. There used to be earth science. It's gone from all the schools. Understanding if you are better with your hands, if you're better at that, there has to be industrial arts. There has to be shop available. They've taken all the shop out of the high school. So this is going to be the 3rd iteration. Where are we now, and how do we fix it? Where we are right now, as of January of this year, Maine was ranked 50th out of 50 states. And I hear all the excuses out of the unions. I hear all the excuses out of the administrators. They say, well, it's this, well, it's that. I understand COVID was a problem, but there are 50 states in the United States, and we are number 50. They all went through COVID too. How come we're number 50? And the answer to that question is we have taken our eye once again off the ball. 70% of our 4th graders cannot read or cannot read to level. Almost 70% of our 8th graders cannot do basic functions in math, literally multiplication, division, basic algebra. I don't care whether you're teaching them to be sensitive about everything from dogs to furries. I don't care what you think you're teaching. I hear all the blowback. I get it from people. Oh, but we're teaching them this and that, and they've been damaged by COVID. Well, you know how you get undamaged? You start setting expectations, and you say, you know what? I'm going to work with you, but I expect you to do this homework. Teachers are getting reamed out for giving kids homework. Okay, no, that's not how it works. You can't learn without homework. At the end of the day, you have to set the expectations as high as you want them to perform, and then make those expectations their own expectations so that when they go out into the world, they thrive, they prosper. Of course, we have to give them an economy to prosper in. But part of this is the education system. You got to get shop back in all those schools. They need woodworking. They need to be able to work under the hood of a car. I learned how to work under the hood of a car. You need to know how to write a check. You need to know all these basic things that we don't any longer teach in the schools. So we graduate kids with 11 credits and we say, you're good to go. No, they're not good to go. If you can't read and you can't do math, how are you going to get a good job at BIW and have a career there? They have to go back and start retraining you all over again if you happen to be one of the people who's going to get up off the couch and not take money from the state. One of the things I'm going to do as governor is my promise. I will be in every single high school in this state. I will inspire them. I will explain to them how the American dream works. I will explain to them that if they can just hold on and learn and do the hard thing, we learn by doing the hard thing over and over again. Winston Churchill failed at just about everything he ever did until he saved the Western world. So we have to teach our kids to think bigger, think higher. We have to inspire our teachers. They have the lowest morale in the country. We have to give them the pay. My mom started at $12,000 a year, ended at $60,000. Now they start at $40,000, which is rather ironic because the top 8 staff in the education unions in this state all make over $200,000. And where do they get that money? They suck it out of the paycheck of teachers who are making $40,000 a year and are doing all the hard work. At the end of the day, you got to support your teachers, support your parents. Parents need to get involved in their school boards. School boards are very important. The state has to encourage parents to get involved. If a parent bumps into someone telling them that they need to be shut down because their First Amendment rights don't work, I have a plan for them. You lift your cell phone and you call the governor, and I will intercede immediately. We will change the culture of the state so that we go back to those values that the World War II generation taught us, that hard work is not a bad word or a bad phrase. You do get out what you put in. You know, I started cleaning toilets at the age of 12. I would clean 26 toilets and fix them as needed. So I learned plumbing every morning. at a summer camp when I was 12. That's a lot of toilets. You know what, though? I felt the luckiest guy in the world because I was getting paid $40 a week. And so you have to reacculturate the idea that having a job is a privilege, but one step further, which is completely non-ideological. It's just the way the market works. If you will work hard, if you will train yourself, if you will get the skills, because the more skills I get, the more I know, the more valuable I am, the higher I think of my own self, the more people are going to pay me money, the better the chance that I'm going to advance until I own the company. And these kids are impressionable. What are we teaching them? They're teaching them grievance culture. We're teaching them to complain about everything, make excuses for everything, and go collect a check from the government later. No, that is not a purposeful life. People older, younger, any age need to be taught to have a purposeful life. You have to first imagine it, and then you have to believe you can be that person, whether you want to be an Olympic pole vaulter or you want to run your own company or you want to be an advanced engineer at Bath Iron Works. You have to envision it, believe in it, and then work for it. If you do that, you begin to change the whole culture of the state of Maine. And that is one of my missions.
Let's take a moment and envision the state the way you'd like to see it if you're governor. What would that look like?
I think we need to have a safe state, which is to say we get the drug traffickers out of here in 24 months. We need to have a business-friendly state, cut the taxes dramatically, the regulations dramatically, the mandates dramatically. And we have to have a state in which education is prioritized and young people can look forward. But if you really want to know the kind of state I want to see, I want this to become not just a magnet for businesses and for kids to stay here and a model for how a great state is run and we respect markets. I want to chase the progressives out of the state. I want this to become a state where folks who believe in the values, the Norman Rockwell values we're talking about, safety, businesses being able to thrive, jobs thriving, people having a great life, having time for leisure on the side as working, making a great check, and then their kids being safe and earning a lot of money. I want that to be the kind of place that we live in. And frankly, that's not what the progressives want. They want power centralized. They want to tell you what to do. They want to regulate your frog pond, and they don't give a damn about whether you can pay for anything. So I want them to flee the state of Maine. It is not any longer their progressive paradise. It is a state that belongs to the people, that is thriving because the people want to have lives that they can believe in and where they can stay here for the rest of their life and have their kids and their grandkids here too.
Thank you so much for coming in. And we know how busy the campaign trail is. We do appreciate your time.
Well, I love the fact that you guys are doing this, and I love being on your show. And so when you want me again up here, I'm happy to come up.
I'm sure we'll ask you again.
I thank you for doing what you're doing.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.